network webinar on COVID-19 to understand the impact and implementation of the current crisis on business and people. So I'm delighted to welcome everyone and thank you for taking your time on Friday evening to join us. So we are expecting quite a good number of 100 people sign up, and we are live on Zoom and Facebook, and also we are recording this discussion for future on-demand viewing for those who are interested. So if anybody has any doesn't want to appear in the video in the future, please let us know. Welcome everyone. Before I start and welcome the speaker and deep dive into the discussion, I just probably give a bit of in terms of housekeeping. I'm switching off all the mics so that we minimize the disruption. And secondly, we've received quite a lot of advanced questions, and we'll be going through some of the questions at the end of the discussion. So over the 1 hour and 30 minutes, we have 60 minutes where we're going to hear from our speakers in terms of their experience and share some the perspective and guidance and practical tools on, and also help us to go through some of the questions we've prepared for them to answer. And then after that, we have around 20 minutes to take and trying to answer some of the questions that we've received. And please, if you're on the line and you want to raise any question, please type it, and then we'll go through them at the end of the discussion. But before we kick off, I just want to give you a bit of overview for those who are not aware about OAN Africa, what we do. So I just, if you don't mind, let me share my screen. So this is just an overview in terms of, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Yes, so for those who doesn't know much about OAN Africa Network, OAN Africa Network is an initiative we launched 2 years ago with an aim to support and empower African entrepreneurs and investors, businesses, leaders, and professionals within the Midland. But now we've opened our scope across the UK and also engaging participants and members in Africa. And of course, this was at the backdrop of various gaps we identified in the market in terms of the participation, competitiveness, growth of various African professionals, businesses, and we thought it would also be a good idea to bring members together to also facilitate and promote collaborative thinking and sharing of ideas. So we are committed to advancing many key areas, including entrepreneurship, innovation, excellence, inclusiveness, and sustainable economic growth. And of course, we do this through connecting people, sharing ideas and opportunities, and also discussing on various economic topical issues. So over the last 2 years, we've hosted several meetings, high-profile meetings, networking discussion, and within the Midland, and of course now with the digitization, now we are moving online to engage even wider participants, and also it gives us an opportunity to go global. So these are some of the speakers who have been on our platform, including others. And we facilitate various networking platforms, and these are some of the, just to give you a snapshot of how we engage our members, professionals, to give them an opportunity to connect, to continue sharing ideas and inspire each other, and of course empower entrepreneurs and professionals. So that's the overview in terms of OAN Africa Network. So for today, the discussion is all surrounding of course, the issues that is affecting all of us, and our thoughts to everyone who's been impacted, and we hope everyone on the line are well and safe, and of course we pass our regards to everyone and wish them well. And today we aim to look at how the situation is evolving and the implication on businesses and people. So to just, of course, we've prepared a couple of questions to help us break down and also to guide us with the discussion in terms of looking at the current situation and look at some of the implication on the economy, how it's shifting business or work as usual, livelihood and things like that, and also how our speakers are responding and what are the best practice they find useful that they can share to help. And of course, making sure that we continue to how can we respond to the new norm of remote economy and the digitization. So to help us answer some of these questions, I'm not going to go through the landscape, but we all know the current situation in terms of the mega announcement and the trend that we've been seeing in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks or so. In terms of COVID-19, of course, is a tragedy to human, and of course, the global economy is seeing quite a lot of changes in the economy in the short term, and of course, will have a long-term implication in our lives and how work as usual and businesses, and of course, quite a lot of disruption in the market and supply chain. Quite a lot of businesses at the moment are closed, and of course, we've seen a lot of cancellation of many major activities and major events and things like that. And of course, the recession is guaranteed. It will depend who we talk to. Some economists agree that we are in recession. We are just waiting for depression. Others still debating if you call it a recession. Of most of us, we agree recession is around us. We just need to understand when the recovery and how long. So these are some of the major announcements we've seen in the last few weeks and a month to kind of set the scene and stimulate the discussion. So to help us understand and break down some of the questions we've prepared, I'm delighted to be joined by an amazing panel of speakers who have humbly agreed to come and join us and share the experiences in terms of the implication within their business or working life, and also give us some of the tips and best practices that they found has been useful to help them keep going as usual at the same time preparing for recovery. So from starting from the right, we have Léone, who's a senior broadcaster, journalist, and TV presenter, BBC. And second, we have Martin Uzus, who's the head of business development at Union Bank in London. And thirdly, we have Sora. She's the executive director at Voxafrica TV and also work at the Bank of England. And fourth, we have Grace Babazi. She's a specialist and a scientist in psychology. So she'll be taking us through, give us some tips how we can manage our mental health and anxiety and stress, especially in the current situation. And of course, the fifth one, we have Titilayo. She's a specialist in law, but also she'll give us a bit of, she has also good understanding in terms of also good food supply chain and the implication on the current situation. And we also have Dr. Astela, who is a specialist in the cross-cultural transition. So she's here also to give us an overview in terms of how the situation is likely either to impact positively or negatively on cultural and collaboration and how is that is affecting various cultures in the UK, especially we've seen some society are more impacted than others. So she'll give us some of the insight in terms of psychological impact and social. And also we have Gemisola, who's a specialist in dynamic impact. I'm sure she'll be delighted with the current situation to help us go through the dynamic. And finally, we have Kathy, who specialized in diversity at Birmingham City University. So help me to welcome the speakers, and I'm not going to introduce them. Probably it's better before we take the question, we go through the agenda to give them a few minutes to introduce themselves who they are, give a bit of overview and insight in terms of their work at the moment, how the situation has been evolving, and how some of the disruption they've seen from work as usual. Of course, even livelihood in general, because we can't separate between work and the livelihood at the moment. So help to kick off the discussion. Léone, are you on the phone?
I am.
Yes, okay, I can hear you. So let me start with you, Léone, to introduce yourself and give a bit of overview flavor in terms of how the situation has been on on your side, especially being in the media reporting all the changes and the various shifts and announcements. You must be quite a busy person, so probably just start the discussion, introducing yourself and give a bit of a view where we are at the moment.
No problem. So I'm Léone OUEDRAOGO. I'm a senior broadcast journalist and also team manager for BBC Africa. I'm managing two business programs that we broadcast in Francophone Africa. So obviously, as you can imagine, it's been quite challenging to work in this current situation, especially as broadcasters, as journalists, and also to adapt ourselves to this situation. Like many people, obviously, we have to social distance, we have to work from home. So I think the challenge was like really to put in place technology for journalists to be able to work from home and also not disturb the programs and continue to inform and educate people while they're at home, because obviously they're at home, so they do work, but they also watch TV a lot. So yeah, we really had to make sure that like we continue producing quality content, inform people, educate them, but also following the government advice, staying at home, social distance, etc.
Welcome, Léone, and we look forward to hear from you some of the things you've been broadcasting and some of the findings. And secondly, I wish to welcome Martin, and of course Martin also to give a bit of a view from a financial perspective and in terms of what's the situation in the financial industry and how are they responding to the crisis at the moment. I know quite a lot of people are in the financial trouble and are facing quite a lot of issues. And of course, businesses also are looking to access cash in the current crisis, which is very difficult. So Martin, welcome, and also give a bit of intro in terms of how is the situation from your side.
Thank you very much, Eugene. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a new experience for all of us, and it's something that we are all getting used to. I work for Union Bank UK. I'm head of business development. In that role, I lead, a team of relationship managers, basically overseeing the entire business of Union Bank UK across our markets. The COVID-19 came as, like to everyone, as a surprise, and many people were not prepared. And so also with the financial services sector, they were not that prepared for it, but we all had to adjust. And one thing that is key to surviving is having the right, IT infrastructure. So our IT guys did an excellent job to prepare, everyone to ensure that we have a seamless operation working from home. So that, hurdle we were able to cross, and so we're doing that now. Now, it's not, been a smooth sail, because working from home comes with its own challenges. But having said that, I guess, we are all adapting. From a business perspective, it has, created lots of disruptions, obviously. Both with our clients, and even with internally with working with other counterparties. We find that a lot of things are coming up. Issues around force majeure, because if you've extended financing to corporates, and the corporates in turn have had contracts with their own suppliers or customers, this disruption clearly, has created, some issues, which means that, you're going to be seeing, like we're seeing, lots of, contra frustration, force majeure, pleading, and all of that would impact, the business. Actually, if you've granted loans, you've got to carefully think of how to get your money back. Apart from that, there are other issues, on the business. Like, obviously, economic activities have slowed down, so your customers' business are impacted, and that's again is what you deal with. With the fact that there is economic downturn, and that will translate to a decline in business. But having said that, it's important to adjust, and adapt to the situation. And in terms of the workflows, we're seeing, so far, no major hitches. We're able to interact and communicate, within ourselves, with colleagues and with clients. And then the other issue is being at home. You've got to be able to adjust to the new normal, like they say, and have a plan and to ensure that your work goes on even while you're at home and you have minimal disturbances. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and we look forward also to hear from you. Next time, I welcome Sora also to join the stage and also introduce herself and also give us an overview in terms of how the situation has been from a media point of view. I don't know if she wants to touch something about BOE, but I'll leave her to introduce herself and give the context.
So hello everyone, thanks for the opportunity, Eugene, and hi to all my fellow panelists. So as I said, my name is Sora Yago-Boli. I work as an executive director for Voxafrica TV. We are a bilingual Pan-African TV channel, and then we broadcast in Europe, in Africa, and in USA. So basically, and also I'm also part of the decision maker panel at the Bank of England. So basically, we gather information for the treasury, for the monetary funds, and also we gather information to align with the main decisions within the bank to help the other colleagues within the industry. How the situation has affected us, from a media perspective, as Léone has already said, touching base on the BBC, we had to work from home, basically, as everyone knows, because we're in a tech sector, so it's quite, we can easily adapt to produce shows and to make sure that the business remains sustainable, though we know that there'll be a high impact in terms of consumer spendings, in terms of company spending in the advertising budget, which will basically impact us as a private media as well. And from the perspective of the BOA, we had to come up with policies to enable the Chancellor and the government to be able to decide on the different issues that how they can help people who are facing financial difficulties, to help people who are out of employment, and how to help businesses, especially small and medium businesses, to be able to cope up with the current uncertainty and issue that we're facing because of the COVID-19. But I'll have time to answer to more specific questions. Thank you.
Welcome, Sora, and thank you for that brief introduction and overview in terms of how the situation are on your side. Next, I'll invite Grace also to introduce herself. I guess I'm assuming probably she's one of the busiest person at the moment with the whole situation and the crisis. You must be the highly sought person. But let me give you to introduce yourself and give us an insight in terms of how the situation within NHS and what kind of how things are evolving with the people working from home, with lot of the isolation, and of course we are expecting a lot of people to be impacted mentally, anxiety and stress. And Grace, welcome, and please share some light in terms of things in the situation.
Hello, I hope you can hear me. How are you, everybody?
Yeah.
I'm privileged to be invited to participate on this forum. It's my first time, so probably I'm not used to being open to the world, but I think it will go well. As you said, my name is Grace Kirijuru-Mbabazi-Rendeire. I'm a scientist, a researcher, an academician at DPsych Prof level. DPsych stands for Doctor of Psychotherapy Professional, Prof. I think we can understand that. I'm currently conducting a clinical scientific research about HIV and psychiatric disorders in Uganda. And I'm a specialist in psychoanalysis, which is the study of the brain and the mind, the study of the human brain and the human mind together. So my research is in psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and the study of people who are enduring the pandemic of HIV and psychiatric disorders. I'm working in liaison with Butabika Hospital in Uganda and Uganda Virus Research Institute, Entebbe, Uganda as well. And the research is supervised by Metonia Institute and Center for Psychotherapy, London. I've worked for NHS England for a period of about 20 years now. And currently I'm working for NHS Wales on the front line. I also run a private practice under the names of Kirijuru-Rendeire Clinic for Psychotherapy in London. As a researcher, I have picked interest in understanding and finding out more about COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm again spearheading a clinical research under the theme or the title or the thesis, if it could come to a thesis or the study, COVID-19 and the human unconscious thought process, a psychoanalytic perspective. And I'm focusing on the causality and effects of COVID-19. However, as a researcher, I'm operating on a no hypothesis. The fact that with COVID-19 at the moment, we have no hypothesis. We as the medical profession have not yet understood, and we are still lacking knowledge in the causality. Where did it come from? Definitely, there are many conspiracy theories that probably I could highlight later in the conversation or in the discussion. But still, as a researcher, I have to try to learn, to find out knowledge, and to want to help the public, as I am a frontline worker with NHS. I'll talk about the details later, but good evening.
Welcome, Grace, and we look forward to learn from you some of the findings, and especially in terms of the implication of COVID-19 on people in general, especially in the current situation. Next, I want to invite Titilayo also to give an overview in terms of her situation and shed some light how the current crisis has disrupted some of the key things she's been working on, business, and also livelihood as usual. Welcome, Titi.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to this excellent panel. We know that it's a very significant one considering the unusual circumstances that we are in. So I'm Titilayo Adebola. I'm a lecturer at the School of Law at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. But I'll just add a caveat here that I'm speaking in my personal capacity. So my research focuses on intellectual property rights for food and agriculture, I work on issues like plant variety protection and geographical indications. So from an academic perspective, one of the main areas of disruptions that we've had considering this COVID-19 pandemic is our lectures. So we've had a change in the types of lecture delivery sessions that we have. So previously we had the classroom lecture style, so face-to-face lectures, but now we have had to move that to online lectures. So we have platforms that we engage with students through, sometimes previously recorded lectures or through live lectures. We have discussion boards. We also have big questions about assessment. So how do we ensure that the students are properly assessed in these circumstances? We have moved to online assessments or online examination sessions where students are given questions beforehand, are not allowed to submit the answers afterwards. Also, one of the other issues that we will face is attending conferences. So as an academic, we exchange ideas and we present our findings and our research through academic conferences, but we have had to stop that now because because of the social distancing and because of the restrictions on travels. So what we have been able to do to resolve that, with some associations or societies have moved to online or virtual conferences. So that's another way, that's another disruption that we've had. And perhaps one issue that we might want to draw attention to would be the divide, perhaps between the global north and the global south in terms of academic development. So we know that in the global north here where we are, that we can engage in online classes because of the availability of technology. But we know that in Africa, for example, in Nigeria, we know that some parts do not have stable power supply. We know that their students might not have access to stable internet services. So one question that we would have is, how do we ensure that students are still able to engage in their education during this crisis, depending on how long it goes for? So that might be one issue from an academic perspective that we would want to discuss. Beyond that, we also have personal situations around students. So we know that some of our students work, and there are questions around how they would sustain their livelihoods when they are not able to work again. So we have those issues that we're trying to deal with in terms of trying to understand the circumstances and context that students would face in this unusual period. So I'll just perhaps end with that as an introduction, and we could engage in further discussions as this panel unfolds. Thank you.
Thank you, Titi, and welcome to and we look forward to learn more in terms of some of the area where the food has been disrupted, and also the academia side of it. Next, I go to Dr. Astella, also to introduce herself and also give some insight in terms of some of the activities she's been doing on cross-cultural transition, and help us to understand some of the implications of COVID-19 on various cultural communities. And probably, I don't know how far she extend her work, probably she'll be able to shed some light. Welcome, Astella.
Thank you very much, Eugene, for having me here today, and welcome everyone. My name is Astera, and I have background in both clinical psychology and social psychology. And until the last year, I was an academic. I used to work at the University of Helsinki in Finland, and then at the University of Northampton and the University of Warwick in the UK. And in January this year, I launched my own company. I'm now an entrepreneur. I'm an expat mindset coach and a cross-cultural transition facilitator. And now every day I work with expats, or at least before the outbreak of the coronavirus. I used to work with expats who live in a foreign country and who wanted to develop themselves during their cross-cultural transition, or who struggled with their cross-cultural transition, with the adaptation to the new cultural environment, with anxiety that was caused by problems with adaptations and similar. My business is online, so in terms of working, I do not really change now anything in terms of connecting with my clients, because it's still online, so I haven't noticed any differences in how I work. But of course, my business was affected as well, because what is happening now around the world, it brings lots of uncertainty. People don't know what is going to happen. Everything changes so fast. Every day we face different things every day. We don't know for how long the lockdown is going to be in our country or in other countries. And now it's hard to, it's difficult for people to focus on their development, on cross-cultural transitions, like expatriates. They are in foreign countries. They don't know whether they will stay there sometimes, because the companies now struggle financially. And so there is lots of uncertainty, and it's hard to think about development. So coaching has become more difficult these days, because there's just fewer clients who are interested in it. And even if I think about those clients who struggle more with anxiety, I personally haven't noticed any increase in, there is lots of people who say they are anxious, but still they rather focus these days on more basic needs, as we could observe in the UK and in other countries a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. People rather focused on buying goods, stocking canned foods, pasta, and the legendary toilet paper. And that's what many people are more focused these days, more basic needs. The development, personal development, that's not the main focus these days. So I would say that many coaches like myself, we struggle these days with clients, because people are focused on something else.
Thank you, Aristella, for that brief introduction, and also give a bit of an overview for some of the work you are doing on cross-cultural transition. Next, let me invite Sora to also introduce herself and give an overview in terms of what she's been doing on dynamic impact, working various businesses and leaders across the UK and in Nigeria. Hello, Gemis.
Yes, thank you very much, Eugene. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. It's so amazing to be with this on this great panel, and I've learned so much even from the earlier discussion that other panelists have spoken about on what they're doing currently in the engagement, either on the front line or in other sectors with respect to response to the COVID-19 crisis. So to give a bit of a background, so I'm a legal practitioner and called to practice in Nigeria, and currently studying for my postgraduate degree in the United Kingdom at the University College London. And in this I currently also hold a role as the president of the Graduate Law Society, leading a postgraduate course cutting across 70 nationalities. And I'm also currently involved in terms of response to the in the front line as an NHS volunteer responder. So basically, my work is not as rigorous as the work of Dr. Grace, but mine is just, we offer with other group of volunteer responders, telephone support and chat support for those who are in self-isolation this period. So it was just an engagement I took up a couple of weeks ago when the lockdown began in the UK. So I run Dynamics Impact, a social enterprise. And now talking about the implication of this crisis, I will be dwelling more on its impact on businesses, especially for me as a person who is in business, and also what I'm currently facing dealing with my clients as a legal practitioner in private practice. But before then, Titilayo talked about the impact, and she already dwelled more on the impact in the academics, but speaking from the perspective of a student currently studying. So, there's been so much concern, and just like you rightly mentioned, it was just a sudden escalation that converted the whole process of learning, which was physical, which was what everyone who enrolled for their programs picking for the UK because they wanted to have physical, that physical opportunity to be able to learn, and a whole lot of other things that came with it. But then, I mean, when the crisis struck, face-to-face teaching was suspended. As a matter of fact, even before the lockdown, we already had exam timetables, we already had details of exams, and suddenly the crisis escalated in the UK, and then lectures were suspended, assessments were also converted to online. And some of the concern has been like, to what extent the academic integrity of an online assessment will to what extent can we ascertain for the academic integrity of such assessments, and also its long-term impact even on your degree. So there are a whole lot of issues, there are a whole lot of concerns, even from the perspective of students. And a lot of, I mean, there was directive issued from the school that students cannot return to their countries. And some of them return to their countries where they do not have access to materials to be able to carry out their research, which they had planned to embark on if they were still able to stay back in school to be able to conduct such research. So these are some of the issues rising. Of course, the management, the school, they're trying as much as possible to mitigate the impact of the crisis. But then, I mean, it's something I wasn't prepared for, and it will take a while, and it will take compromise at both ends, both at the level of the management and the student. So back to what I'm currently doing, at Dynamics Impact. And so particularly talking about the effect on business and client, what are those things that businesses should be focusing on? As a matter of fact, it's even, I mean, more or less too late if they have not started doing those things when it comes to responding to this crisis. For me, I have a couple of contractual obligations that I have running in Nigeria, and there are steps I had to take immediately the crisis struck, because getting into such agreements, what are those things that I needed to do in terms of reaching out to my clients, and also advising my clients why they should reach out to whoever they must have had an existing obligation with before the crisis escalated, and what are those things they should look out for. And Martin talked about the force majeure clause. Like, those are important things clients and business owners alike need to start looking out for in the agreement. So are there provisions in the agreement that that talks about crises like this? And the question is about there being a force majeure clause. Does that clause specifically speak to issues like a pandemic? So, I mean, force majeure clause could cover, now to bring in context for those who probably might not understand what a force majeure clause. A force majeure clause is a provision in a particular agreement that provides for the likelihood of happening of any risk which is beyond the reasonable control of the parties to such an agreement. So, and it must be established that none of the parties were more or less, of course, responsible for that particular act, and acts like the act of God, fire, riot, and things in that cycle could fall to stand as a force majeure clause. But the question again is, what if as a business owner, I have a pending agreement, I have an existing obligation, and in the agreement document, there is no provision for a force majeure clause in it? Does that mean that that's the end of the contract? There are other provisions in law that you can explore if there is no force majeure clause in your existing contract. And to be able to also trigger a force majeure clause, if such clause exists in your contract, is a question of, in triggering it, you look at, okay, does this relate to any, can this be linked to this issue of this pandemic? And the question is, the obligation to fulfill that particular contract must not have arose even before this pandemic started. So in currently dealing with my clients, I see instances whereby some are raising issues where some people some other business owners who they've entered into a contract with are trying to hide under the cover of COVID-19 to evade enforcement of such contract. Meanwhile, the obligation to perform that contract has arisen even before COVID-19 crisis really started and escalated. So these are some of the things that need to be looked at. And as a person who runs a business, you need to look at the substance of the agreement. Okay, so if this is it, then what are the steps that you also need to take in the case that there is a force majeure clause. And if there is no force majeure clause, what are the other provisions? Then we have the provisions of frustration that you can rely on if there is no force majeure clause in the particular agreement you currently have subsisting in dealing with this crisis. And also, I could take questions from our participants who probably wants to know what they need to do now when it comes to access to justice for their businesses in times like this. Because yes, I mean, of course, there are different jurisdictions and there has been issue of disruption, not just, I mean, in terms of health emergencies and issues. Now, this is impacting on different sectors, the economy, businesses. And so the question is for existing conflict, for existing matters and matters that will arise even in the course of business dealings, because despite the crisis, some businesses are still running, especially businesses that are internet-based. So for existing crisis in such instance, when we have injury in some jurisdictions where courts are shut down, what can business owners begin to do? What are the alternative options that they can explore in order to be able to access justice at a trying time like this? So I look forward to going ahead with the conversation and taking question in that regards as we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemi, for that broad introduction and also deep dive into some of the key issues you're seeing across various spectrum. And of course, you've touched a good point, like out of crisis, opportunity rises. Of course, some businesses are struggling and are declining. Some have just flattened their operation. And while others also scaling up, I've been discussing quite a lot of businesses from like healthcare, food industry, and the technology sector who are actually growing and they are recruiting people. And of course, they are likely to be on the right side of the the crisis. So hopefully we'll deep dive into this later on. Finally, let me invite Zoe from BCU also to give a bit of introduction in terms of her situation and give us insight in how the current crisis is impacting business as usual and livelihood at the same time. Welcome, Zoe. Hi, Zoe. Hello, Zoe.
Hi, Eugene. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, so I can hear you.
Yes, I think it's an amazing opportunity to be part of a very fantastic panel. My name is Kathy-Zoe, and just to start off by saying, I'm here in my personal capacity because, yes, I am the Vice President Equity and Inclusion for BCUSU, which is the Students' Union of Birmingham City University, but not the major university itself. So just here in my personal capacity. But yes, within my role as Vice President, there are a lot of issues that have come to light. I mainly handle student inquiries and staff inquiries that are organization-based. And I can say, just as Titilayo said and Baby Shola mentioned earlier, that, you know, being a student within these times is very difficult because a lot of students are worried and stressed about academia. You can look at international students. The UK has a vast majority of international students. So being isolated maybe back home before the lockdown went down, and some students are in different countries all over the world and having to take assessments, online assessments, some assessments that have been postponed because maybe they don't have access to simple things like laptops, Wi-Fi if you're in Africa where electricity goes halfway whilst you're still doing something. You know, it's a challenge and it impacts your mental health as a student. And there's so many issues that students have brought to light. The main issue is accommodation. Most students are known to have 0-hour contracts where they would work based on their timetables at school and universities, and having to know that you have to be home, isolated, you need money, you need funding, you need a source of income to sort of feed into paying your bills, paying your accommodation bills. It might be rent, it might be your phone contracts, food, all of these things are things that students need to pay for, but without having any form of a recourse. I love that they mentioned the forced wager. I am a law student, a law graduate actually, from Birmingham City University, so I do understand forced wager and how it works. But the fact that this is unpredictable, it's not something we can contain, it's not something that we can manage. It's more like an act of God in a weird sense, because yes, there are conspiracy theories about how COVID-19 came about, but who it affects in terms of students is, how do I find my rent money? If the university is not supporting us, then where are we going to go? If students are isolated at home, some students live within a shared accommodation, which means you're isolating with other students who are equally scared, have different backgrounds, and you're forming this family bond with people that you probably have just started being familiar with. And because COVID-19 only started in January and just progressed in the UK around March period, that may be for some students who joined to start January courses, who had just started a February intake. That means you've just gotten into the UK, you don't know who your housemates are, and now you're forced to isolate with them. Now you're forced to have no job, you haven't properly settled in, you're expecting money, you're expecting all these family indications from being away from your homes and your primary family to be an element that affects your academia. So there are a lot of issues around assessments, around money for students, around settling in, around how they're going to access services. So I feel like it's been really difficult. As part of my the company I work for, which is a students' union, we also have employees that have had to be furloughed in the UK because some of the services they provide, like they work in the shops, for example, shops are closed down, the university is closed down. So what happens to those employees? So it's trying to see where you can work the income as a company and as a business, and trying to make sure that you're protecting all your staff members, and that every single staff member feels that within this time of crisis, they have an element where they have a source of income to sort of pull in from. So it's been really difficult from a student perspective. And yes, business continuity is going to be really hard because this is uncertain. We don't know how long the lockdown is going to be for. Is it going to continue being shut down? Like they're going to continue extending it? Will they continue trying to put 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 5 weeks? At what point in time do we as a business start thinking how much money we've lost within this time that we're meant to be making up, maybe money from shops, money from student purchases, and those students who are being furloughed long term, how does it look? Like Tituloyo was mentioning, and Bemishola when they did their introductions, that we also have to consider that with assessments. If you're a student who's just started, how is this looking to have online classes? What about students with disabilities? It's about looking at different things that have been associated with COVID-19. And yes, as a business, we've moved to working from home. But I feel like the challenge is if you have issues with lighting and you have to be glued to your laptop from 10 to 5, which are your normal working hours, how do you make up for the difference? And at the same time, working from home, what are the challenges of workstations and keeping up with DSE assessments and trying to make sure that, you know, in as much as we're trying to cope and we're trying to adapt to this new situation, we're still not impacting our mental health or our physical health within the same process. So I feel like as a business, it's been really hard to try and cope. Every business, I'm sure, is we have no forward plan. We can only have a short-term plan, but try and manage the risk as it comes day by day. So I feel like it's been an interesting challenge, and I look forward to the conversations we'll be having today because they seem on point with all the challenges that I feel as a business we've also faced the same challenges that everyone has mentioned before me.
Thank you, Zoe, for that brief introduction and give a bit of shedding some light in some of the challenges you are seeing, especially from a student kind of perspective and both local and international. If I go to our next question, I think some of the things has been highlighted, but I'll try to combine a few questions and take some of the questions we've received earlier on from some of our audiences. The next question we'll be looking at in terms of coping strategies and best practice, especially in the interest of the other people here on the audience and people listening to us on Facebook. And what are the coping mechanisms and strategies have you find useful to respond to the current crisis to adjust? And just to some thought-provoking question is the situation like to help people rethink and improve the way we do things? Is it likely to encourage better discussion and from businesses to refocus more on people and how they engage people in terms of flexibility? So what kind of coping mechanism and how you finding, especially if you have employees working from home, how are you finding their performance? Are they coping? Do they have the right environment? What some of the recommendation or guidance are you offering them to make sure that they are not getting stressed, they are focused on their activities and they're still delivering, and of course professionals also making sure we maintain a focus to look for long-term view than just short-term crisis. So probably if I start with Martin.
Thank you very much, Eugene. I thought before I answer the question directly, I thought it's important to take a look at, at the businesses and, the impact of, what's going on the businesses, first of all, to put this in context, and then we can drill down to specifics, of how it impacts us. Clearly, the social, political, and economic ecosystem has changed with COVID-19, and we are treading on uncharted waters. Therefore, it's imperative for businesses, and indeed people, to be well, prepared, to proactively respond to the emerging business landscape. In the present dispensation, adaptability and flexibility are actually key to survival, and this is true for not just businesses, but also for individuals, how you're able to adapt. From, the global, impact perspective, we probably all have seen, the release by the IMF, in the last couple of days, how this has impacted businesses. The statistics are not looking good at all. Decline in global GDP by 3%, $9 trillion wiped out of the global economy. In sub-Saharan Africa, the GDP is going to drop, according to IMF, by 1.6%. China has gone down, it's going to go down by 1% this year. This is on the back of an average growth of about 6% in the last few years. So the statistics look horrible, but what are the implications of all this? One, of course, job losses, unemployment, we can see that clearly. The US announced over 22 million, job losses, and UK about 2 million. We can also see depression in, global commodity prices, And what does some of these things mean? You're going to see now and in the future, there will be significant disequilibrium, and, particularly in the area of, wealth redistribution amongst peoples and nations. So all these are important to put in perspective. From a business and investment standpoint, you're likely going to be seeing flight to safety because people want to move capital to where they're safe, in the safe haven. Now, bringing it down to specifics on how it impacts us or what strategies one is using. Firstly, it's important to be flexible, as a business, and because I run a business, some of this are key to me. Flexibility is important, and now that speaks to your flexibility of response to uncertainty, because if you have an uncertain situation, the question is how do you respond to what's going on, and that is key, and that will enable you to align and realign yourself and your business to be able to achieve your goals. One thing that has helped us as well is what I call scenario planning. So there should be a migration to scenario planning. You look at various situations. Now you're working from home, and all your staff are working from home, and you need to communicate with clients. You've got various aspects of business, the operational side, treasury, risk, and all that. So how do you respond to certain situations? So you've got to have scenario planning within the business. That's key. And part of what will help you too is to have a clear understanding of the relationship between the global developments and local realities. Because for us, for instance, UK is not our market. Our market is out there in Africa and other parts of the world. So we got to understand, the impact of these developments in our respective markets, both from a country perspective and from, the client perspective as well. And as a business, you've got to, look at cost efficiency and competitiveness, because, you find out that revenues are declining because for obvious reasons, because business is declining. So you've got to watch your costs. So what are the things you're doing? How do you explore, cost reduction methods to ensure that, your bottom line does not suffer at the end of the day? Some of those are important. And you've got to begin to look at, how you can optimize your supply chain as a business. What are the incentives that you can tap into to enable you, in spite of COVID-19 and whatever is going on, to enable you to survive and, come up with those strategies to help you build a business, sustain a business. And there is the issue of competition as well. Now, in the current crisis, clearly you're not thinking about pair competitiveness. You're looking at, rather a response from the consumer perspective. You know, consumers at this point they'll be looking at how to, you know, get products that will add value to them. So gradually, there will be a shift from, you know, premium brand to value brand. So how do you ensure that you've got sustainable, value, or you build a sustainable value, so that, you know, you ensure that you remain relevant in terms of your ability to service the clients, you know, and that is quite key. We also, you know, as a business, we also considering, you know, various aspects, you know, of our business in terms of how do we deploy the right, you know, digitalization to ensure that we're able to, you know, remain competitive. Now, from an individual perspective, you know, it's you know, quite challenging, you know, because when you're working from home, you find out that you juggle with a lot of things, you know. But the key is for you to have, you know, a plan and have a structure to work around it. You know, you've got to be able to, you know, plan your work, your meetings, you know, and of course take breaks too. You know, all of this will influence and affect your productivity, you know, and as you work from home. And I found out that, I mean, a friend was talking to me about, you know, the fact that he seems to be putting in a lot of hours, you know, working from home. And it is true, because you know, everything is online, you know, but then you wake up in the morning, your emails are all hitting there, you're responding, and it continues, you know, then you work, before you know, you're working late in the night. And these days, because most people commute an average of 1 or 2 hours, you know, a day, all that is added to your work hours, so there's no commuting, you're at home. So you find that constantly you're working. If you're not careful, you know, you would go beyond the, if you like, the boundaries, and you get, you know, you get yourself worked out. So you've got to have that plan and create time to relax, create time to you know, take some breaks, you know, so that you can adjust and still remain productive. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry, sorry, my microphone was on. Thank you so much for that deep insight, and of course, touching on various issues and providing some of the recommendation of best practice that people can take away to be able to align themselves and navigate the current situation. If I go to Léone and Sora, especially from a media perspective, we know the media at the moment is flooded with so many stories, some true and some untrue, we don't know. And you know, especially people at home for so many hours, days and months, they are watching too much TV. And what's the implication? What's the situation? Which media should I watch when? And and also, how are you adjusting in terms of reporting? Because there's also concern some government are not allowing through reporting, and the information coming out is not accurate at the same time. And of course, the media is very important in terms of reshaping society perspective and how they see the situation evolving at the moment. What's the implication is it in terms of from a media perspective, and what are the key takeaways that you can share with our audience? Let me start with Léone and then we go to Sora.
I think Martin mentioned that flexibility is really important, and very quickly, a lot of broadcasters, the broadcaster I'm working for included, we really had like to change the way we work. Thankfully, we were already using some technology in the past that we are using now. Obviously, we're using now in a bigger scale, but we already had the technology in place for that, so that's very good. Regarding the information, the fake information, as you were mentioning, obviously there's a lot of fake news, but again, it's something that my organization was already fighting on, working on fake news in the past. So it's something that very quickly we decided like to really make sure that like, yeah, every single day we do a report where we tell people, okay, you heard that or you've seen that on social media, be careful, this is a fake news. So I think it's really like something like we really wanted to like tackle from the beginning and make sure that every single day people have the right information.
Yeah. How about Sora? What's your thought in terms of from your perspective and also some of the implication we are seeing? I don't know if you want to touch on the economic perspective also. We've seen quite a lot of news in recently how the UK GDP is likely to fall to by I think 35% back to I think 60s, and the unemployment, which is likely to create quite a lot of issues in the market. And of course, not to deny majority, minority are always the mostly impacted in the society when it comes to job loss, to business, and we know some of the SMEs struggling at the moment are minorities to access some of the disruption loan and some of the major fiscal support that has been released by the BOE. I don't know if you want to touch on those aspects and also some of the strategies you are adopting yourself and to help you align with the current change in the situation for our audience. Sola?
Sorry, I was having issue with my microphone. So thank you for the time. So basically, in terms of TV perspective, TV is already technology, and then digitalization was already key into the way people were working, as Léone touched base on. So basically, I'm going to speak about the economic disruption. We all know that the economic disruption from the COVID-19 and its containment affect particular industries and businesses far more than others. So adaptability is key, and trust towards the employees that you're working with is also key, because people will be working remotely, they'll be working from home. Trust is being built in between colleagues and in between executives and managers, and they're also team members and colleagues. We know that here in the UK, there's been like a brilliant response for the COVID-19, bringing the percentage of repayment rates from 0.75% to 0.1% for the Bank of England. We also know that there have been so many policies that have been put in place for people who are furloughed, for people who are out of employment, for people who are self-employees, for them to cope with the situation. But I want to touch base on the aspect of the how Africa and African economies are really affected financially as well by this situation. Because though we're here in the Western countries, there's a possibility to be able to provide a response in many countries. There have been responses that have been provided by so many African leaders and countries as well. But at the same time, it does affect Africa a bit more in terms of economy, especially the informal sector. For example, if we take Senegal alone, 500,000 of people are surviving on fishing. And if the industry and the frontiers, the borders are closed down, there's a lockdown, so it does affect transactions. I also want to say that though we can see that, I know that Martin spoke about recession, Martin spoke about the fact that it's going to affect us economically as a whole, but I just want to bring a bit of positiveness in this whole situation. For example, in the textile industry, there's a booming in the textile industry because the African have come up with a solution due to the shortage of the mask. We can see that there've been like masks that have been produced using African prints and all that. So we've come up with a flavor of innovation to boom some specific sectors which will continue to evolve after this pandemic. So I really wanted to, I wanted to talk about like the positiveness of the overall situation as well, because it's true that we're hearing sad news, we're hearing that we all locked down COVID-19, but I think it's also an opportunity for Africans to build the Africa that we want, because there's this myth of the Western countries that are like invincible, and then we thought that epidemic was only coming from Africa when we saw the situation of Ebola. But we see that the epicenter for the COVID-19 is coming from China, then Europe, then USA. So basically, there's this opportunity for us to fast track our decolonization, I would say, and count on ourselves while the Western are very busy trying to survive on their own. It's an opportunity for us as an African, because I really wanted us to speak about how Africa is affected, because we're on One Africa network. We know that the Europeans, we all have our own responses to the COVID-19, but that's my say for now.
Thank you for touching on the, of course, African implication on African economies. We just had another webcast 2 days yesterday on the implication, and there was quite a lot of highlight in terms of deferring responses from various governments with no stimulus, fiscal stimulus packages like the UK, and also, of course, also some of the responses that has been implemented on the African economies when the environment is not conducive, and also for cash-based economy. So the implications are quite high, and especially you touched like Senegal and Gambia that depend high on, I think, 40% on tourism industry, which has been almost gone to its knees. So Africa is, of course, we all know, is likely to be hit hard, and also because there is concern in terms of the data coming out from the region are not reliable, as not much testing has been done. But probably in the interest of the audience, let me just go back to the UK situation. Probably I'll go to the next one, Dr. Mbaba's Grace, if she's still, and also the other psychiatrist in the room who can help us. Of course, we know the current crisis is likely to impact people mentally, of stress, anxiety, and all those. How can we, or what are the coping mechanisms that we can, or you can advise people to help them build agility and resilience to help them navigate the current situation as we look at towards recovery, and of course for the long term?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll start by probably highlighting the feeling on the front line as the worker in NHS. Probably 3 weeks ago, we had some people say, or from the studies, that on the American streets, there was smell of death, which I presume has happened in the UK, has happened in Italy, has happened in China. And this, as a frontline worker on the wards, having clinics on a one-to-one with patients, it really ignites human emotions. Emotions of anxiety, emotions of fear, emotions of frustration, emotions of anger, and lack of knowledge to treat. As you well know, this pandemic is a new pandemic that has challenged the experts in medicine, experts in research, and all the scientific fraternity. But it comes with a lot of psychological effects, not only on the frontline workers, but actually on the patients themselves and on the entire world. And some of the implications, most which are negative implications that we come across from the medical industry, is, for example, social distancing. We are advised to social distance. We are advised to self-isolate. We are advised to stay indoors and keep safe. And I'm glad we have positive effects as to the advice from the governments, from medical experts, from researchers, and from science. But again, upon working on the advice, there are severe psychological effects and long-term implications on the human being and the health of a human being. And these effects definitely bring about relapse. And this is relapse in mental health. When someone isolates, someone tends to feel lonely. Someone's daily routine tends to change, either in food, either in sleep, either in visiting friends. So the pattern changes. Probably there's lack of activities. We are confined to our gardens. We are confined to our houses. Probably people are experiencing very big financial difficulties. People have lost jobs. And worse still, people have lost their loved ones. I want you to imagine you're working and almost all the patients die. The smell of death. The smell of death. How does that phrase impact on the human being? How does that phrase impact on the unconscious brain of a human being? This is a crisis. It's a global crisis that needs global measures and global interventions and global solutions for everybody to participate, not only NHS frontline workers, but everybody to participate. But still, my questioning is, we are still lacking knowledge. We don't know where it came from, despite, in quotes, that they are theories. And now, politically, if I can touch on that, governments are starting to fight about who did what, at what time. The blame culture is starting to come in worldwide. We've heard recently that the World Health funding is put on hold. For heaven's sake, let's face it together. If we don't have the funds to buy the gadgets, to buy the medical gears, to buy the ventilation, to buy the oxygen, how are we going to survive? The political situation, the world is starting to fight each other. It's as if we are in World War I or II. Probably this is coming to World War III. And when you are seeing the patient die and you can't help, you feel very incapacitated. And these are the psychological effects on the workers, which we take home. We have families, we have children. The whole world, people have died. That's a dysfunctional human being. You get home, you can't think, you can't eat, you can't sleep. And you know the result of that? Depression. And now that develops into psychiatric disorders. You've seen frontline workers crying and saying they can't go back to work. In some of the developing countries, we've seen doctors run away from the frontline service, run away from the patients. So what next? What kind of world are we going to live in? These mental health disorders, some are post-traumatic stress disorders, depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, emotional unstable disorder. Everybody's breaking down. What are we going to do as the world together to challenge this pandemic? It started as an epidemic, you know, within the national levels, but when it gets to 1, 2, 3 countries, it's a pandemic. And that was declared by who? Probably 2 months ago. So this is a challenge. As a frontline worker, I'm challenged. comparison to the whole world, everybody is challenged. We are living in a world of uncertainty. We are living in a world of what do we do? Despite the fact that I'm a medical practitioner and a researcher, my brain sometimes is stuck. I can't think. That's why I'm more interested in how the human being reacts to this unprecedented, uncertain situation that we are into. And the bad thing also that beats our understanding is there's no time lag. We don't know when. We don't know who. Even in the houses, we are scared of each other. Your child goes out, meets, there's no meeting friends anyway, but goes out to the shop to buy water or buy essentials. Coming back, I have to ask, did you put the mask? Did you meet anybody? First, wash your hands. And here I'm a mother telling my own child, getting scared. So how does that affect the human being? The world is insane. We are going to go mad.
Yes, it's to be honest, of course is a challenge from a health, economic, and clinical aspect. But of course, there is quite a lot unknown ahead of us. A lot of tests has not been confirmed. We're still talking about hard economy, which is still not valid, and there's lots of unanswered question. At the moment, of course, like every problem-solving approach, if you have a problem, when you don't know the root cause, you first look at the containment as much as possible. But that's the only action we can do at the moment to stop the spread, and while also we're trying to find out the solution in terms of from a medical perspective. And clearly, the way you mentioned, there will be quite a lot of mental implication on the people affected, those who are losing their loved ones, and of course the wider society, anxiety, and we are already talking about slow recovery because not everyone will be keen to return to work and they start networking like we used to, but it's a challenge to everyone. But if I go to our next speaker, Chitirayo, probably also to share her perspective in terms of what's the current strategy mitigation are you applying to help navigate align to the current situation? What would be a recommendation to the audience, some of the best practice and key takeaway that you find are useful? And of course, you mentioned you wanted to touch a bit on the in terms of what do you see the situation, any warnings ahead we should be aware of, and things like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Eugene, for this. So I'll also draw on some of the perspectives that the previous speakers have spoken about. So 3 keywords I would say would be planning. So firstly, we have to plan our structure for the day. For example, we know that we don't have the luxury of perhaps going to our workspaces physically. Now we're stuck within a particular space to both live and to work. So one strategy that perhaps I have adopted is to set out strict plan for the day and strict timelines for the day, and I try to adopt those and stay within those. I know that there will be disruptions because there are times where we would go beyond what we planned for the day, but I think that has helped me so far. Then adaptability, so learning how to adapt to this new normal that we have. So learning how to use technology better, learning how to communicate better has also helped. Then flexibility, so just drawing from all of the lessons perhaps that we're learning from our workplaces, from our personal lives, and just being able to combine those into our work has helped me. So I would say 3 keywords will be planning, adaptability, and flexibility. Then in terms of food, for example, so I know that Dr. Grace now has talked about the frontline workers and medical perspectives, but then we could also think about food. So what happens with food? So food could be another crisis. I know that health is a major crisis in this pandemic, but food could be another serious crisis that we could consider. So all the way from our production, so from farm to fork, there are issues that could affect or disrupt our access to food or availability of food. From the production perspective, we could think about, first of all, access to inputs. So are we sure that we're getting access to the right types of seeds, to the right types of plant varieties? Do we have workers? So we know that there's also a labor crisis. Some workers have moved back to their home countries. We have some work has been disrupted or stopped from going to the farms because of social distancing. We know that there are essential workers, so they should go to farms, but some of them are at home because they have to take care of their children, or they have to take care of their loved ones. So we have the issues around access to input, and then labor as well from the production perspective. Then also from the supply chain, so from our access. So if we're going to talk about how we move the food from the farm, for example, to the supermarkets or to consumers, we know that there's no country that is food self-sufficient. So we're all interconnected in our food supply chains. But we know that some countries have adopted some non-tariff barriers or some trade restrictions because they're trying to protect their own citizens' welfare. So some countries are beginning to stockpile or beginning to hoard certain types of foods. So that's another issue that we've had. Then from the supply perspective as well, we could think about some of the trade barriers in terms of cargo. So moving our food physically. So we have some disruptions with air travel or with shipping travel. So how do we ensure that food moves from across countries? And then from the perspective of the consumer, so when the food actually appears on the shelves in the shops or in the markets, consumers that have lost their livelihoods or they have lost their means of income might not have the economic power or the capacity to purchase the food. So that would be another aspect that we might want to consider as a community. How do we ensure that people that have lost their livelihoods can access food? Because even if they are not ill with the virus, their lack of access to food might be a problem. We know that in the global north, there have been packages or there have been government policies and programs to address these issues. But the question will be, what happens in the global south? What happens in sub-Saharan Africa, for example? We do not have prevalent food charity organizations or food banks, like we might have in the UK or in other parts of the global north. So how do we ensure that people have access to food? So people that have lost their livelihoods, how do we ensure that they have access to food? We know that in this regard, some governments, for example, the Nigerian government has decided that it's going to give out or disburse some amounts of money to ensure that people have access to food. But we know that relative or drawing from that, we have questions around aid and corruption. So how do we ensure that the monies that have been earmarked to help the people, the poor people, how do we ensure that those monies get to them? Or how do we ensure that they're actually, or the foodstuffs that have been allocated to them, how do we ensure that it gets to them? So I think that we have questions around the whole food value chain from our farm to our fork. And that might be one concern that we might have to resolve in this pandemic.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And of course, it's good you mentioned everywhere in the world they've been talking about helicopter money, and Nigeria was also at the forefront to say that they'll be sharing the money. But of course, some of it is just a discussion. They never get implemented. A lot of people are still waiting to hear the progress. If I go to Alestela, from your perspective, especially, of course, looking at the cross-cultural impact, and do you think this situation, of course, we are all talking about we are in together, do you think this situation likely to enhance cross-cultural collaboration, working together, build the relationships, and what will be what's from your perspective, what are the best strategies that you are seeing to help navigate the situation? What's working well from your society or from your clients? We can't hear you. Oh, we can't hear.
Now?
Yes, we can hear.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. So from my perspective, I would say that yes, we are in this all together. So definitely it looks that it might be easier for different communities around the world and also within countries to collaborate and to do something against the outbreak, to prevent another outbreak and things like that. But on the other hand, if we think, for example, about global business, global companies, there is a threat at this moment that expatriates, those professionals who go to other countries, yeah, for work, they may not be that much needed anymore, because as everything now is being done online, people have to work from home. There might be not that much need of like physical transition from one country to another. So that can change. That can be the big impact, that people would rather stay in their own countries and just do the work remotely for global companies. So in these terms, it may not necessarily enhance the cross-cultural transition or the cross-cultural exchange. So it all depends from which point you're actually looking at it. But of course, we are also affected in different ways in different countries. Also within countries, different communities are affected differently. If you think about different minorities like African Americans, there was here a question from the chat, and I read it this week earlier as well, that African Americans in the United States are more affected. There are more victims of the COVID-19 among those ethnic minorities. But that's not that surprising, because ethnic minorities are pretty often more deprived economically and socially. And if we even think about our immunity, we build our immunity for many years. Yeah, it's all about the nutrition, it's about different habits, it's about taking supplements, vitamins, etc. So those who are more deprived economically, they struggle with jobs, they are unemployed more often. Of course, those people may be more susceptible to COVID-19 or any other disease. So in a sense, it's not that surprising that there might be more fatalities in those communities that are more deprived. And that is something that creates more division as well, even within countries. So it's all, we still don't know how it will affect the cross-cultural collaboration or the cross-cultural exchange, because there are so many levels to consider. That's quite a complex issue. We need to see how it all works, what is going to happen in the incoming months, and then we probably could see how this situation evaluates.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Kathy, for that overview in terms of. If I go to Sora and Kathy for their thought in terms of what the best strategies to navigate and of course align ourselves to the new norm, and what are the best key application or approach or methodology have you found useful, and also as you discuss your recommendation, do you think this situation is likely to accelerate inclusion within the society? Is it likely to encourage better discussion on how we can the society, especially UK, can be more inclusive in terms of how we work together in certain areas? And I know Kathy is an expert in diversity and inclusion, and these are the hot topics that always reverberate in every discussion and at the board level, to provide, to open up for access, for opportunities, and the many. So do you think is likely to help to bring those board discussion and facilitate inclusion? Maybe Gemi and then Kathy.
Okay. So I'll take it in two parts. First, for businesses, for business owners, and then talking about how, as professionals, we can also navigate these trying times. So for people in business, I mean, one thing we cannot take away is the fact that this current crisis has caused a lot of disruption across different industries. So irrespective of what industry that you play in, you must be ready for the disruption. So for myself, I'm preparing myself for the disruption in my field, being a legal practitioner and as an arbitrator. So normally as an arbitrator, I mean, when we have arbitral proceedings, you've got to come physically, you know, before the arbitral thread, you lay your claim and all of that. But just in the last couple of days, there's been different changes. I mean, there are now alternative with respect to remote hearing. So these are disruptions that as young professionals, irrespective of whatever industry you play in, we must be ready for, and we must be tech savvy. Like, I believe maybe for some of us, but for me, coming on a platform like this, coming to share knowledge is probably maybe the first time we're doing it, or maybe this wouldn't have been an alternative if probably for One Africa Network, it would have just been a gathering where we all converge. But necessity now has brought us to explore this platform. And this is going to be for a long time. So the question is, how much more are we going to be able to maximize this platform to be able to make progress in our career, in your profession, or in business, whatever industry that you play in. And particularly for businesses, I mean, I would want to reiterate the point that if you probably have contractual obligation ongoing before now, which you feel you've not taken any step on, it is my recommendation is that it might even be an individual contractual obligation you had with someone. Reach out to that person, reach out to that business owner or your client and start a conversation. Of course, don't just assume, oh, after all, it's a global crisis, so everyone knows what is happening. What I did when all of this started was because there was a particular brief I was handling. Yes, I'm here in the UK, but it was a brief I was running. I mean, I was handling back in Nigeria. Of course, I was facilitating it. And then the first thing I had to do was reach out to my client. Yes, he knows there is a global crisis. Everyone knows there's a global crisis. But the important thing is about, okay, so what is the next step? Okay, this is what is happening. What readjustments can we make? And also for businesses who probably have taken a loan or for whatever obligation you have had. I mean, Martin will be an authority with this respect on how you have to reach out to your bank and speak to them. Don't just assume after all the bank know. So you can start exploring options of probably delay of payment moratorium and all of those things. These are provisions that the banks are also considering, but don't just assume and then relax and not take any step at all. It is very, very important. Then reach an agreement, reach a consensus, either ask for an extension of time. Because yes, it's a global crisis, but it's important that you do what is needful. So for professionals also, another scare at this time that I've observed is the fact that a lot of people, I mean, one of the earlier panelists mentioned the rate at which people are losing their job at this time. Even those who have not gotten any notification from their employer are not sure of having that job when the lockdown is over. So the question is, as a professional, what can you begin to do now to add more to yourself in terms of skills, in terms of adding more to beyond what you were before the lockdown started? What are you doing to currently engage your employers to discuss this issue of the crisis with them and how the company or the organization can move forward? These are things you can readily do to ensure your place, because trust me, if you are an employee and your boss, your employer is not reaching out to you at this time, I can say probably the percentage of the job still being guaranteed after the lockdown is less than 50%. Because if you are not being reached out to at this point, it means you are dispensable on the team. And that is one step organizations will be looking to consider when the lockdown is over, to probably reduce the number of employees and all of that. And you don't want to be one of those employees that are affected. So reaching out to your boss now and saying, okay, what can we begin to do? Prepare yourself, invest. There are a lot of trainings online. Those are some of the things I'm exploring. Just in the period of the lockdown, I've been able to add value to myself. I've been able to, okay, yes, getting out. Yes, the economy might be on lockdown, physical lockdown, all of that, but our mind should not be on the lockdown. we must even add value, and technology has made things easier. I mean, if we look at previous pandemic outbreak, technology wasn't as advanced as this, but we have this advantage and we should learn, we should maximize it as professionals and become better. And most importantly, at the end of the day, is the fact that we have to be hopeful in all of this, because it also has effect. It has an impact on our mental health. And what we do, yes, previous panelists have spoken about routine and all of that. Making a plan, this is what I want to achieve. Yes, I know it will be pretty difficult all of these times, but I believe getting out of this is being able to do everything that is needful to put yourself in the right frame of mind. And also getting out of this, I mean, globally, is something that we have to all work together. Nations have to cooperate. Countries of the world have to work together. Like I'm currently doing a research, my research on my postgraduate study is on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I was, before the lockdown, before all of this crisis, my focus was on the dispute resolution with respect to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But now I'm looking at redefining that research now, because I'm looking at, okay, even after the lockdown, what is the prospect? What are the potentials? What are the implications of this crisis on the Continental Free Trade Agreement? And even Africa as a continent also have to see beyond, okay, after the crisis, what are those things that Africa can begin to look within to be able to achieve by itself? And all of these things are possible if we work together as one, working together, seeing this crisis as a uniting factor for us to make sure we get out of it easily, because I believe that the power of network mind transcends their part. But importantly, I'm optimistic that we'll get out of this, and I'm hopeful that there are a lot of lessons that we'll take going into the future, but we will be the better for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemi, for those positive feedback. Especially, it's good you mentioned and to look at the positive side, to use the current crisis as an opportunity to look at ourselves in terms of how can we transform and better ourselves, like they say, come out from the crisis at the highest level, empower ourselves, like you say. Technology has given us the opportunity to learn at a distance, on demand. For like we are locked at home, of course our mind shouldn't be locked, because there's opportunity to learn, empower ourselves. And it's good you touched on in terms of your relationship with your employer, because if at this crisis they are not engaging you, then you should think about your your job. And of course you need to stay ahead of the game to make sure that when the situation will recover, you've already positioned yourself for competitiveness. So if I go to Kathy and then we can summarize, because it looks like we've run out of time. Kathy, it's good thought-provoking discussions, and I hope everyone is inspired with some of the key recommendations and the outputs of the, but time is running very quick. But if you can probably also give us your own perspective, and also, like I mentioned, the question if the situation, the crisis is likely to accelerate inclusion or help to bring some of all the discussion within businesses, within the community. How can we accelerate or address diversity and inclusion and open opportunity? Of course, we've seen the commitment of some of the minority within the healthcare sector, doctors and all those doing at the front line are the priority. So what's your thought on that, and what are the key practices that you want to share with our audiences?
Okay, so my main role is within diversity and inclusion. So equality, diversity, and inclusion. So basically inclusivity. And I know that even though there's a lot of negatives currently, with everyone looking at the virus as it's gonna take forever, I feel like it's gonna get good, and then it will go bad, and then it will go good again. Because I feel like merging interactions with people going out after the lockdown has shifted, and people are now able to travel, people are able to interact, we'll have a few shifts there. So it might die down for a while, and then it will spike up, and then it'll come down again, because you'll be seeing the management of the virus within how it was spreading and how they were trying to minimize it. So I do see it in two parts. I see the negative, and I also see a positive element of it. But touching on equality, I feel that without the virus, we would have never been able to unite. We'd have never been able to be equal on all fronts. All countries are facing the exact same thing. No country is more superior than the other. The virus kills regardless of your wealth, your background, your race, religion, color, everything. We are all equal because of one virus. So you can look at it as a uniting factor, that it has brought countries together that countries would normally never speak to each other. Countries would probably never be taking notes from another country. When Italy had it so bad, the UK wasn't in such a bad situation, but it was beginning to look bad. It means that we now need to take notes from another country. We now need to interact with that country to understand how they minimize the risk. Other countries in Africa do not have as many life cases as the UK, as the United States has. However, how are they minimizing the risk? What notes do we take as the UK to say, in our economy, in our gross development, in the GDP, how will it look once the crisis is over? So I feel like there's a lot of positives that the virus sort of brought about. There were a lot of workers like engineers, frontline workers, people who clean the hospitals, just people who make life bearable for people, but people never used to consider them as being essential or frontline workers. But the crisis has made us understand that a hospital cleaner is equally important as a CEO who has to be sitting in an office. Because without that cleaner and without the sanitation of a hospital, things are not functioning. Without the engineer to fix up the ventilators, we're not appreciating these workers that have always gone to work, but have never been regarded as that important. So I feel like it gives us the ability to lobby the government to change, to lobby the government to create fair practices for employees, to lobby the government to change particular practices for workers that are always overlooked, workers who probably just go to work but never have recognition. So I feel like the virus has its positive elements and it's opening light and shedding light within some loopholes that we probably just overlooked because we didn't see the necessity back then, but now we have to. Having to work from home is really difficult. A work allocation model where, yes, you're working from 10 to 5, we need to break, we need to plan your day in order to fall into a routine. However, what happens to the worker who cannot afford the laptop? What happens to a business that never had to regard its online presence? It's the same thing with branding, with marketing. Businesses are now being forced to go back into their business model and looking into how they can diversify their services. Some businesses are just face-to-face businesses. They are used to clients who come in face-to-face. But when faced with a pandemic where you can't see the client before you anymore, what do? You're forced to go online. You're forced to understand how to communicate effectively and keep your business on track. So I feel like it is a great learning opportunity and a great learning curve to businesses to learn how to expand, to learn how to diversify, to learn how to be inclusive, even to the generalistic customer or clients who they've never generally have reach or ability to market to. I feel a lot of businesses have had to sit down and understand how to take care of their workers. These are things that there are unions that are meant to be there for workers in workplaces, but they tend to be problematic because in most instances, whenever they have an issue and they bring it to a union, everyone sees them as if they're fighting the establishment, not that they're trying to improve it and fight for workers. But now it's the same unions that they have to understand how to take care of the workers. Their involvement is key. Their demonstration of how to look after people in their homes while they're still your employees are still equally crucial. So labor laws are now being overlooked and we're now bringing them back to say, what were we doing wrong as a business? How can we match up? So there's a lot of, I can say, key takeaways that you can sort of pick up on to say, this is best practice of try and take some breaks whilst you're at home. But like Sora was saying, that if you look back and think, if my employer is not getting in touch with me, it means I'm not that important or I'm replaceable. So what are employees meant to be doing? I feel like there's a lot of platforms that are available. Harvard has free online classes. Some of them are 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, but it's a certification that you can get without having to pay. We would have never known about these services or these training opportunities had we not been in a pandemic where we are forced to be home 24/7. We cannot go out, we're in fear of our lives, but you learn to expand your portfolio. So I feel that while we are in a situation where we don't have as many choices, there are other ways that we can look into future reference of what happens after the pandemic. Look at your businesses, look at how you're establishing them, look at your workers, look at how, if your business was to crash tomorrow, what is your business continuity plan? Set out plans where even if force majors come into force in this time where we cannot control what's happening tomorrow, what practices have you set as a business for best practice for your employees? So it's allowing businesses to also have correct practices that safeguard their employees. It allows businesses to look forward to a business model that is not just face-to-face based, but is very much online networking, it's online skills, is trying to encourage your employees to know that as an employer, you still want to look after them, but as a business, what services are you offering? So it's been very interesting that a lot of people are now understanding supply chain management, distribution in different countries. A lot of online businesses are really flourishing at the moment because no one wants to be out shopping, but they want deliveries. How can these things be done? And I feel like as Africans, we need to learn and pick up on these key skills that we can also latch onto and build our economy. I know that we sort of worry about what happens in Africa versus what happens in the UK, but we can actually look and copy and take notes from the UK or what they're potentially doing wrong that we can use to improve services in Africa. So if the UK cannot go out, what about Africa where things are probably not as good in terms of economies? What notes can we take as people to improve our businesses? So I would say that the first thing to look at as a takeaway would be innovation. Look at how you are improving yourself. Look at how creative you're becoming. Look at how people around you are creating opportunities that you too can also create, because everyone has a creative mindset. It's just how you ignite that mindset and how you capitalize on it that makes a massive difference. I can say that look at diversity. It's not everything that has to be online. It's not everything that has to be face-to-face. How do you merge the two together? Face-to-face interactions versus artificial intelligence versus allowing your business to expand on a horizon that is not just limited to the basic norms of business. Look at the economies. How can you dip into this market? Our stocks plummeting here, but increasing there. What is the difference between this business and that business that makes this business more desirable? So I feel that there's a lot around inclusivity. Like I said, you can be innovative, you can look at best practices, you can look at your mental health, you can look at how, even though you're still at home, create a routine, try and move away from it. Find time that you can improve on yourself. Like I said, I've learned so many skills I never knew I could actually learn. But it's only through a pandemic that I've realized that you can actually sit down and understand that you can do your own hair, you can make your own food, you can produce pizzas that you were ordering and spending almost £30 for. Now you get to do this home-based. It's improving families as well. Look at how a lot of people have had to go to work and come back, go to work and come back. Now you're within your family network. A lot of the times we're leaving our children to be raised by carers. We have child minders, we have babysitters. We're leaving people within a care system and we can't raise our children because we're out making money. But the pandemic has allowed us to be in the home, still make the money or still try and get furloughed if possible and be there for your family. So there's an element of realizing that there's a greater inhumane aspect to a pandemic that is very inhuman. And as much as we might look at it negatively, there's a lot of positives to take away from it and say, look at it as a positive pandemic. Don't look at it as a negative pandemic because the anxiety will kill you, but look at it in a positive light of what opportunities are available to me and how can I help? So I would say that that's my main takeaway from the panel discussions that were ongoing today.
Thank you so much for your views and of course sharing your key points, and of course you highlighted a few things we need to look at in terms of how we can improve our talent and things like that during lockdown, and also look how we can better ourselves. Of course the situation has helped in terms of how we can some of us are being tested in terms of our parenthood and all those being at home 24/7 to 1 month, and spend time with your family also more than we never used to, because you go home, you go to work in the morning and they come. In the interest of time, and unfortunately we ran out of, we are already over. If I just, before we wrap up, if I just give all the speakers 1 minute, what are the final thing you can say? I start with Martin and then we quickly wrap up, because we've already gone over quite a lot. But it's been a very insightful, thought-provoking discussion. Hi, Martin, can you hear me? Hello?
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Eugene. I can hear you. Hello, Eugene.
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, but the screen, can you arrange the screen, because it looks like we can't see anybody anymore.
I don't know what happened.
I don't know. I can't see anyone anymore. But anyway, but you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you. Something is happening.
Yeah, something must have gone wrong. So the screen is all gone. But well, I mean, there's no time, so I'll just carry on. I'll try and wrap up in 1 minute. It'll be difficult, but now basically, can you hear me, Eugene?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you?
Okay. I think, I mean, we're going to be talking about opportunities and future trends and all that. Well, there isn't much time. Okay, yeah. There isn't much time to discuss opportunities and future trends since I have just 1 minute. But I would say that within 1 minute, let me see, I can squeeze all that in. Firstly, from a financial services standpoint, with this pandemic, there are clear opportunities that are coming up, that companies need to start looking at, and see how they can tap into it. For instance, for ourselves, we want to see the opportunities that are there. Our market is mainly Africa and, Middle East and part of Europe. So we, can see from what's going on that opportunities are coming up in certain sectors, Now, these sectors will include agriculture, like Dr. Tsidaya had mentioned. There's quite a bit we can do from the food supply side, raw material, agricultural inputs. There's a lot of financing opportunities in that area. And then pharmaceuticals as well, drugs and medical supplies and equipment. I read the other day that about 9,000 firms, have been set up in China within 3 months to produce PPE. So that's what an opportunity that the pandemic has brought. But also have opportunities in technology too. Nowadays I see there's a new wave of digital transformation, that's going on. And we're going to be seeing an accelerated trend of that. These are things that we're expecting to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, but we're seeing them now. There's a lot of digitalization that's going on, and that throws up opportunities. Also, I expect that in some of the markets that we operate, we're likely to be seeing a wave of business consolidations, mergers and acquisitions. Smaller, fragile firms are likely to die off or be swallowed. So that again provides huge opportunities, financing for advisory mandates and all of that. And like I said, with the emergence of the new level of digital transformation, there are opportunities for businesses to begin to engage and to look at not just how they can be part of it, but also have a digitalization plan, okay? So that with all of that, you have process efficiency, product and service customization, you speed to market, these are things that would help, to boost your business and create the sort of value that you want to achieve. Now, in the future dimension, we're going to be seeing, companies that will survive will be companies that are able to reinvent themselves. Talking about business models, you got to be able to think of, rethink your business model. You got to review and constantly, be on top of it to survive, the emerging business landscape. And for a final word, I would say that, look, we should think collaboration rather than competition, because we can collaborate and be able to, make things work better. We should think flexibility rather than rigidity, because it's only a flexible and an adaptable business that can survive in the emerging, business, landscape. And we should also be having new thinking as against, status quo. We need to move away from certain ways of doing things and start thinking afresh with developments that we're seeing. How do we improve our processes? How do we change our production process? How do we understand our market better so that we can adapt, and be able to deliver what we were supposed to deliver to not to our employees and clients, but also to all the other stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin, for that brief closing summary. I think if I go to Léone, and then Léone, what's your last 1 minute word in terms of moving forward? And
yeah, I'm gonna go very quickly so everybody can speak as well. I think the discussion has been really, really interesting, and we mentioned many times the human aspect, the collaboration, etc. And I think one thing that we need to remember is that what we are living now is nothing. The post-coronavirus is going to hit us very, very hard. So I think all the lessons that we are learning now, all the collaboration, the human aspect, we need to make sure that all these things keep going after the pandemic, because like the economy is going to be very bad, like everything is going to be very bad. So we need to make sure to be prepared for that. And one thing as well that we mentioned is mental health. I think self-care is really important, but it's also important to remind people that don't expect perfection, because this is an exceptional circumstances. So don't be too hard with yourself, because obviously that like we're living in an unprecedented time. So people have to be safe, look after themselves and their mental health, because as I said, like the post-coronavirus is going to hit us very, very hard.
Thank you, Léone, for that brief summary. Very insightful. How about you, Sora? What's your 1 minute summary? How do you see the future? What's your view?
Basically, from my end, I see that in the future we have to all as a business be able to manage new commercial risk while we try to drive commercial success via innovation, creativity, and I think that the new normal is that adaptability and flexibility is key to any business going forwards. And in the TV sector, I would say that because people are locked down and at home, we might see a booming in the ratings, in the viewing figures for specific programs as well, just to be sure so that everyone can also speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sora, for that summary. Grace, what's your last 1 minute summary in terms of your view, how the future look like? And
Thank you very much again. I'm glad our panelists are very positive about the after lockdown, the next probably world after the lockdown. I'm so glad. But I just wanted to remind us that we are not very certain about the timeline. We don't know when we'll get evidence-based vaccines. We don't know when everybody's going to test worldwide. Everybody's going to test and get a vaccine. We don't know when. So that gives us a broad timeline of a very huge uncertainty ahead of us. However, I would love to stretch that after the lockdown, we have severe after effects or long-term effects to deal with as human beings psychologically, politically, economically, and everything. But I want us to appreciate the importance of science, the importance of technology, and the value of humanity. I always call it the philosophy of life. At the end of the day, we are all fighting to survive. Survival for the fittest? I'm not sure about that. But again, it has to be, this is a global pandemic. It's a global crisis that needs global actions, global measures and interventions to effect global solutions. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding us. Of course, we are in for survival for the fittest, and we'll keep in mind. If I go to Titi and then Alistela, what's your 1 minute summary?
Okay, so thank you very much. My 1 minute summary from the education perspective in the global south will be, let's improve our technology so that students would have access to educational materials and they would have access to lectures. From the food perspective, I would say that we should build resilient and sustainable food systems. So let's look at our food supply chains to ensure that we are able to build robust systems that would stand the test of time. Let us think about our varieties. Let's think about small-scale farmers. Let's think about how we can ensure and conserve the inputs that they have over time, being able to select and save. From our supply chain perspective, let's think about domestic consumption. So let's encourage people to begin to grow family farms, to have small allotments, so that in times of crisis like this, where we might have problems with importation, we can be sufficient at least on domestic level. So I would say that we should build sustainable and resilient food systems.
Thank you. How about Astera?
Thank you. Well, my 1 minute summary would be that we definitely need to be flexible now, and also after the lockdown has been lifted, whenever it happens, because this is something that is very important. Everything is changing around us. We are experiencing very unprecedented changes. It's like a huge cultural change. When I work with expatriates, this is pretty much exactly the same because before the coronavirus outbreak, if you wanted to change the culture, you either had to be an expatriate or an immigrant and live in a different country. And now everything is changing. We have not changed the countries recently, but nevertheless, the whole culture around us, the way we work, the way we interact with people, the way how we do our shopping, everything has changed in a few weeks, very, very much. So flexibility is key these days. And it's very important to also work on resilience, because already at the moment we need to be resilient. And after the outbreak has ended, hopefully, we will face different challenges, like the economy going down, and well, it's already going down, and other challenges that we don't even maybe know yet. So definitely resilience and flexibility are important. Thank you.
Thank you. So resilience and flexibility are key. Thank you so much. How about Gemi and Kathy? Gemi, what's your 1 minute?
Okay. So.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, we can hear you. I think we lost it. While we're waiting for Gemi, Kathy, what's your 1 minute summary? We can't hear you, Kathy.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'll say that it's important that we need to consider post-COVID-19 and coming out of it. So I'll say look into business continuity. Look how to expand your business and horizons. Instead of competitiveness, look at protectionism. Look at how you can safeguard your employees. Look at how your expansion and growth would be affected by overborrowing sometimes, might actually it will leave businesses in a lot of debt, because they'll feel they have to make up for a lot of surplus income that they were meant to be making that they did not end up making. So I'll say that it is important to have self-care. It is important to sit down and take care of your mental health. It is equally important to have a portfolio that you can expand, extend your networks as much as you can, try and increase your knowledge as a person. So if you can pick a new trade, learn new skills, advance yourself. However, prepare for the worst, because like everyone's been saying, we don't know when this will end. We don't know how long it will take. We don't know at what point we'll all be safe enough again to be outside and to not have any anxieties about reconnecting and reintegrating in society. So I would say that from a diversity and inclusion perspective, take care of you, because you are more important, because we'll have nobody if coronavirus takes over every single person. So take care of yourself first before you want to take care of someone else, because if you look after yourself, you can look after the world.
Thank you, Kathy. And Gemi, are you on the line?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. I think there's an echo. Hi, Gemi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. I quickly wanted to respond to conclude by responding to a question I got privately, but then I lost it because my system locked over at some point. But if I got the question, the person was asked the question, I think, from Zimbabwe. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know if the person is still on the line.
Okay. So it was about the fact that different jurisdiction when it comes to the triggering the force majeure clause. So I would want to advise, I mean, if the person is still on the line, that depending on the law of your country, but generally triggering the force majeure clause, there are three major components whereby you have to consider, yes, if the events that occurred, if it's actually an occurrence that falls within the definition of your existing contract, that it's a force majeure clause, if it was defined in that your particular contract, and if such act was beyond the reasonable control of both parties, that is yourself, your business, and the person you entered into the contract with. And the third element is the fact that you are taking all that reasonable steps to ensure the execution.
Yeah, I think we've lost Gemi.
Of that country, you've been able to explore other alternatives in getting that. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
yeah, it looks like the network is bad. Let's wrap
Okay,
up.
so
You can follow up with the.
yeah, so that's what I'm concluding with. So I would just say your business, just like other panelists have talked about, make sure you redefine your business, leverage technology, explore different alternatives, especially as we are being exposed to at this point, and most importantly, strategically position yourself for the future of work. So like saying post-COVID, what's the future of work going to look like, and what's going to be the place of my business at that point? And also as a professional, what is going to be my place going forward? But importantly for now, let's be in the right mental state, because we can only talk about this when we have our mental health together, and we're able to make progress with our lives as professionals, in our career, in our family, and in our social life generally. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Clearly, it looks like we have a common theme across the panelists in terms of key takeaway. Of course, the priorities are well-being, mental health, and of course for professionals let's utilize the time and upskill ourselves, utilize the technology, position ourselves for the future, of course, build resilience for more uncertainties ahead of us, and also be open for opportunities. Adaptability has been mentioned, quite a lot of things, resilience and other things mentioned across. Just to wrap up, my sincere apology, we've gone over quite a lot, but the discussion and the comment and the sharing the knowledge has been thought-provoking and inspiring. And of course, our objective is to share this kind of information to make sure we continue to support people going through these hard times. And I hope they find it useful and applicable to some of their context. And we look forward to having you in our future webcast. So we're running this webcast every week, every Friday, same time. And we are inviting diverse speakers to come and share their experience, their knowledge, their recommendation, and also as part of the networking, we get to know each other to understand how you're doing and we hope you are keeping well. Thank you so much for your time, and it's a good Friday. I'm sure you're going to have we wish you a good weekend, and keep safe and well, and everyone around you, and we look forward to hear from you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Thank you. Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
All right.